or should I say Montemesh? Is that right? Okay, it's my one word. Okay. Thank you. I'm really excited to talk about migrations today, everyone's favorite topic, and I think brilliant to follow on from Elena's amazing talk just now. Yeah, I'm sure we've all seen our fair share of migrations in our careers, some no doubt more successful than others. And if you've ever struggled with a technical migration at work, I promise you, you're not alone, right? Migrations are really hard. And it's very easy to think that it's going to be a straight line from the start to the finish, and everything is going to be better right away. But in reality, of course, it's often a lot more like this. An uphill path full of twists and turns and surprises. Unforeseen hiccups and bends in the road and interruptions that take away your focus, and what seems like a really short distance that actually takes a lot longer than you might think. So I'm going to talk to you about the bends in the road that we faced embarking on a big technical migration, how we navigated them, and of course the lessons that we learned along the way. And I'm going to be talking about how to know whether you should be going down this road at all. My name is Sophie. I am a staff web engineer and the web discipline lead at Monzo, which is a bank based in London. I have a website. I occasionally write about tech, mostly write about gardening these days. And you can find me on various places around the internet. Now, Monzo is a bank from the UK that lives on your phone, so we've got an app. We're also growing in the US, and hopefully we are moving into the EU fairly soon as well. But as an app-based bank, our main product is just that, right? It's an app. But we do have web things as well. Like most people nowadays, we have a website. We've also got a web banking app for our business customers. But by far, the biggest app that we have is actually our internal tooling for customer services called BizOps. And this is an app where we do chat customers, we do email, we do calls, and we do a lot of internal processes, anything that we need to help our customers. So as you can imagine, it's a very complex application. And we recently migrated our web properties to Typescript, and as Elena will tell you, it took ages. And this is actually the sticker that we got made after we finished. I do have some with me if anyone else has felt the same pain. But it took us over 2 years. I think it came out quite well in the end. But needless to say, migrations are not without challenge, especially in an organization of our size. So these days, if you want to write statically typed JavaScript, you're going to choose TypeScript. It's the most well-known way of adding static types to JavaScript, and Microsoft developed it. But again, as the previous talk mentioned, like when we started our web code base back in 2017, it wasn't quite as ubiquitous as it was now, and there was a viable alternative, and that was Flow. Right? So for people like us who were building in React in 2017, like Facebook's type checker, Flow was a solid option. And it really seemed at that time like TypeScript and Flow were basically the same thing. So did it matter which one you chose? Probably not. We went for the one that we thought would work best with React, because, you know, Flow was built by the same people who built React. So it seemed like a really safe bet. But, you know, a few years later, 2021, we knew we'd chosen the wrong option. Flow, the open source side of Flow was becoming increasingly poorly maintained. Because TypeScript was so much more popular, increasingly we were finding that the packages we used didn't have any Flow types available, so it became really difficult for us to upgrade to like the latest major versions of things because there weren't any types. Also, the Flow server just like crashed all the time. And we used Next.js, and we were stuck using the Babel compiler. They released a new super fast compiler based on Rust, and we couldn't use it because we needed Babel to transpile the Flow. Now, the code itself isn't that different, handful of syntactic differences. So Flow files are just JavaScript files with an annotation at the top, whereas TypeScript files have their own extension, of course, .ts. But we knew that migrating our web properties to TypeScript wouldn't be as simple as just running a code mod across the entire repository, because for one thing, there was just so much code. We have a big monorepo for all of our web properties, and with a ton of shared libraries and dependencies. And it can seem really intimidating when you're right at the beginning and you feel like you've got this massive job ahead of you. Like, where do you even start? Well, we started very small. So one day, 2 of our web engineers decided they'd had enough, and they decided to see what they could find on GitHub. So they found someone's script for migrating Flow to TypeScript, had a bit of a hack to see if they could migrate one package. And once they'd migrated that package, they wanted to see if they could get it building with everything else. Now, flow to TypeScript is obviously a path very, very well trodden at this point. And in fact, a while after we started ours, Stripe open sourced their flow to TypeScript tooling as well. So with any technical migration like this, it's always worth seeing what other people have been doing to see if you can save yourself some time and just use their tooling. You also want to prove that this can work before you commit yourself to doing anything else, because if you try and get buy-in before you've even had a chance to look into a solution, you run the risk of being shut down before you've even been able to do anything. And without a really clearly defined plan and timeline of what you're wanting to do, you're asking senior people with very little context to let you focus on what they might think as a less important maintenance piece over prioritized teamwork. And so it's really important to have that space to experiment with something before you need to go and make a case for it. And time box that exploration effort. Communicate your progress really clearly. Keep a log of any decisions that lead to you choosing a particular technology or a particular path, because someone in the future will thank you for it. So yeah, document everything right from the start. And for every new engineer who joins your team, you're going to need to get them up to speed with what you're doing and why you're doing it. I actually left Monzo in 2021, but I ended up coming back in mid-2022. And I left just around the time that those engineers were having that hack to see if they could migrate something. When I came back, everyone was migrating everything. And so I needed to understand, what's going on? Where are we? What are we doing? And the team put together this dedicated Notion page with all the information about, what we were doing, where we were going, and why it was important. So your documentation should cover every aspect of the migration, the past, the present, and the future. You treat it like a project, because we all meticulously document our projects, of course. But you need to make it really, really simple for somebody with no context to understand what are you doing, how are they doing it, and who is involved. So once you've decided to go ahead, who actually does the work? Should you have one team working on the migration, or should you collaborate across lots of different teams? Well, in an ideal world, you'd have one team who laser focus on the migration and nothing else for the whole duration. And this massively reduces the risk of things not getting done. If you are sharing the load around a lot of different teams, sure, this means you don't need to dedicate a whole team, but it does take a lot longer, and ultimately, you are at the mercy of other teams' planning cycles. So ultimately, this is never going to take priority over what they're already doing. And the bigger your organization gets, the more complicated this becomes, and if you're driving the migration centrally, you can just do it. So in our case, we went for something in the middle where we centralized the work amongst the teams with web engineers in, shared it across people in the web discipline, and we knew that it would probably take a while. And how should you tackle the work itself? Should you do it all at once, or go bit by bit? Well, if you're doing the work shared across multiple teams like we were, you don't really have a lot of choice. You have to go incrementally. But if you do have the luxury of a dedicated team doing the migration, you can choose. Now, you should do it all at once if you are doing a big package upgrade like React. You can't have multiple versions running in the same app. Sure, if you're replatforming on, say, like a static site generator or something, you might want to avoid having multiple build steps. So sure, do it all at once. Small code base, do it all at once. Go for it. But on larger code bases, big bang migrations might be quicker, but they are inherently riskier. And if there's an incident, it makes it a lot easier to identify what's gone wrong and roll it back when you've only migrated a little bit at a time. It's a much safer approach. So as I mentioned, we have this monorepo. Everything uses React. Some use Next.js, and previously everything was in Flow. And changes to the shared libraries within the monorepo can affect different parts of different apps. So we couldn't afford to migrate just like an entire app and just throw it into production, when our ability to service our customers, say, depends on it. So we knew we'd have to go very carefully. The flip side of incremental migrations is that you have to be very disciplined and make sure that you actually keep going, because it can be really challenging to maintain enthusiasm and pace, as we discovered. And there's a real risk here that you go bit by bit, but something else comes up to distract you, and then you put everything on pause, but you never resume it. Of course, like with any migration, we hit a bend in the road pretty soon. We found that people contributing to the repo would copy and paste old flow packages to create new ones, while we were trying to get the amount of flow down in the repository. So we needed to make it as easy as possible for people to make the right decisions, right? And we needed to make it much, much easier to build new things in TypeScript, and we did that with tooling. So we wrote a package generator that would bootstrap a TypeScript library or package with all the things you needed. And this removed a lot of the manual kind of copy and pasting and changing that people struggled with. And it meant that all the new things coming in from there were TypeScript. We could have also lent on static checks here, right? Things like semgrep or ESLint that would fail our continuous integration pipeline and block deployments if, say, somebody had added a new flow file. If you're trying to stop people from importing a specific library, ESLint is really good at spotting that kind of thing. I can't overstate the importance of tooling. If we'd done everything manually, it would have taken twice as long. And just like Elena said, make it easy to do the right thing. So after running that original migration script, we'd give the output a manual going over afterwards to fix any NEs and any outstanding type errors as well. And the team documented it, sorry about your eyes, the team documented it meticulously because they're good people. And we had a space for documenting any issues that people had come across and any fixes for those. And those scripts also generated flow types for the libraries that we just migrated, so that any other apps and packages that hadn't yet been migrated would still have types for those packages we were importing. Now, we have all these shared libraries in our monorepo, and those libraries have transitive dependencies on other libraries in the monorepo. So you end up with this kind of dependency tree. And we didn't want to be in a position where we'd migrate one library to TypeScript only to find that it depended on packages that were still in flow. It wouldn't be able to understand those types. So we wrote another script to find packages that were ready to migrate because all of their dependencies had already been migrated to TypeScript. And then you'd kind of migrate that one, and that would unlock packages further down that dependency tree. Now, especially with an incremental migration like this, it became really important to measure our progress, not only to keep morale up, but also that we could see how close we were, or not, to actually finishing it. I put together a dashboard that showed the number of flow packages in the repo versus the number of TypeScript packages, and it was an exciting day when those lines finally crossed over. And wrote another script that was based on our which packages are ready to migrate script, which gave me a percentage of files that had been migrated. And we posted this in Slack every month. And towards the end, I posted it every time the percentage changed as well, just to get the hype going. So along with that measurement, you also need milestones, which are checkpoints along the way that indicate significant achievements in your migration. And setting these milestones not only made us feel like we were getting somewhere, but it also helped us communicate our progress to stakeholders in terms that they could easily understand. So the first app we migrated was a milestone. Migrating our business banking app was another one. And migrating BizOps, by far the biggest app in our repo, was the final one. And if you're not setting milestones like these for projects, I really recommend it, because it really helps to break down a massive project in much more easily digestible pieces. So another bend in the road showed up around mid-2023. We'd had the whole web discipline working on this migration at this point, but we were still quite a long way from the end. And we'd really hoped to get it finished by the end of 2023, but it really wasn't looking very likely. So things were moving very, very slowly, and there was a risk that we just wouldn't finish it at all. We kind of expect people to do it on an afternoon in a week alongside their squad work, but it just wasn't becoming very realistic. So with the help of my engineering director, we turned this into a hard deadline. We had to get it finished by the end of the year so we could be done with it and we could move on with our lives. So we ticketed up the remaining work. We broke down the remainder of BizOps into tickets, assigned those to teams based on kind of code ownership and capacity. And then we then got buy-in from the engineering managers and tech leads on those teams who have web engineers to say, you need to take these tickets into your weekly planning, and you should be getting them done. And every month, we counted up the remaining tickets for each team, posted an update with our progress, celebrated the teams who migrated the most that month, and of course, gave that all-important percentage figure. As a compromise, we actually reduced the scope of the migration a bit, so we wouldn't have to migrate every single app to consider it finished, only the apps that we worked on the most. And so yes, this meant that there would be a handful of apps left in flow at the end, but these are apps that rarely get touched, and we figured people could just migrate them as and when they need to. We did also wonder whether we could just strip out flow from those apps completely, because we'd still be able to remove Babel, right? Because it's just JavaScript, you don't need to transpile that. But we realized to do that, we'd have to run a code mod, and then check the results of the code mod and fix any problems that came up, and then test it. So we might as well just migrate it to Typescript. We didn't have to get particular buy-in for quite a long time, because at Monzo there is this certain expectation that there's maintenance and engineering work, discipline work that happens alongside our squad work. So for a long while, it was just a small group of web engineers doing bits here and there on the side. But getting buy-in became really important later in the project, once we'd proven the potential value, and it was obvious that things were going really slowly and we knew we had to get things done. And without the backing of senior stakeholders, there was a real risk that the work would never be deemed important enough to actually finish. And my engineering director was a brilliant support here, so with his backing, other less technical leaders in the organization were more likely to get on with it. And it really helps if you know what stakeholders care the most about. Some of them are going to be very focused on risk. What is the danger if you don't do the migration? Others might be more focused on cost or developer velocity. So is being on an old technology making you less able to ship things? Is it holding you back from scaling? So know who you're pitching to and tailor your argument towards them. Stakeholders are also going to want to know when you'll see the benefits from all of this hard work. And with some migrations, it really is 0 to 1. So you don't see the value until it's completely done. And for some of the TypeScript stuff, that was the case. You know, we could migrate 99% of packages, but for as long as there was any flow code in the app, we'd still be stuck using the Babel compiler. But there was a small amount of incremental value in being able to work in TypeScript. So the documentation was a lot better, our IDEs worked a bit faster, and we were able to upgrade some of our libraries a lot sooner than we'd anticipated. In my opinion, the greatest threat to any migration is not complexity, it's actually changing organizational priorities that leave you unable to finish it. So make sure the powers that be understand the risks of not completing the migration, because it's very easy to think that you can just pause it and carry on with your lives, but in some cases, you'll end up in a worse position than you were before you started. I'm legally required to include this XKCD comic about standards here. The lesson is that you might introduce one new technology to replace them all, but if you don't finish, it's going to be one more technology on the pile. Thank you. Maybe you'll do a little bit of your migration, and then you need to focus on something else, and then somebody else will come along and add another new technology to the pile, and then you've all got a load of different teams working on different parts of a website, and you're all using slightly different technologies and frameworks. It's also very common after mergers and takeovers when other companies' systems get brought in to the parent company's systems, and you end up with a lot of different tech stacks. But think about this, right? When there are 5 different ways of doing the same thing in your code base, how is an engineer supposed to know which one the right one is? And what is their motivation to update the old stuff and replace it with new stuff if there's still a lot of the old stuff? And if someone's paged for an incident, and this particular bit of your website uses some really weird data fetching library, and the rest of the website uses something else, like, what are they supposed to do? And of course, you know, most of us are web developers in this room. Like, think about the end user. By adding a new package or library, like, are you increasing the bundle size that the user then has to download at the other end? You're also much more likely to get buy-in for your migration if you've proven you've given a lot of thought to the safety of the migration. So minimizing disruption to operations, not inconveniencing people too much, and of course, having an escape plan if things go wrong. Because any migration comes with risk. The important thing is how you deal with that risk and prepare yourself for what can go wrong. Incidents are an inevitable consequence of doing things and moving forward. You know, except that you'll probably have some incidents when you're migrating things, and that's fine. The important thing is that you can recover from them quickly and safely and learn from them. We almost certainly had some bugs and errors that arose from migrating some stuff to TypeScript, but because we were going incrementally, we could roll them back quickly, fix them, and then move forward again. Just like growing out a bad haircut, there's going to be a really awkward in-between phase where you've got the old and the new technologies alongside each other. You're going to have to maintain them both and make changes to both of them. You might have to accept some temporary slowdowns in processes, like additional build steps, right? So we had to have both Flow and TypeScript compilers in the build process throughout the migration, which did add a few seconds onto every build. But keep on going, and eventually you'll get to the point where you can remove the old thing. And we did it. So in December last year, I was running the migration stats script more frequently to see the number ticking up, 97, 98, 99. And I PR'd a change towards Christmas that was just the remaining Flow files in the main app. And thanks. Wish I'd had that at the time. Just people following me around clapping. It was great though. Like the new compiler was faster in both development and CI. We could upgrade those packages sooner than we'd hoped. Concerningly, we found quite a lot of type errors when moving from Flow to TypeScript that Flow had just kind of blissfully ignored. Lots of genuinely missing parameters and props. And most of us use VS Code, and being kind of TypeScript native, it is a lot faster. No more crashing Flow server as well. Now, when you do finish, make sure you celebrate it. Now, it's not an easy task doing a migration, and it can take a really long time, as it certainly did in our case. So recognize everyone who contributed and saw it through with you. Post messages in public forums. Like, this was in our company-wide engineering announcements channel. I love to publicly embarrass people. So make sure engineering leadership know what you've all achieved. We got stickers made. Everyone loves a sticker to show they took part in something. If there wasn't a sticker, did it even happen? And that is the story of how we migrated to TypeScript. Now it's time for your story. So next time a migration opportunity presents itself, here are some things that you should think about before you take the leap. The first question you should always ask yourself is, do you even need to do this migration at all? As time goes on, if you don't do this migration, will you be in the same place or will you be in a worse place? Because if you'll be in a worse place, then yeah, you should probably do something about that. But if you'll be in the same place, I encourage you to give it a lot of thought. The decision to introduce a new technology needs to be really, really well considered. And you need to have a very clear idea of the benefits that you're expecting to get from it, because all benefits are relative to the effort required to actually do the migration. And it's always going to be more effort than you think it is. Is there a point at which the effort outweighs the value? And this gets more of an issue the larger your code base gets and the more complex your organization is. And remember, technology isn't free once you've implemented it, right? Chelsea had a brilliant analogy yesterday that was, it's not free as in lunch, it's free as in a free puppy. Like, you get the puppy, but now you have to look after it. There's maintenance to think about. So who's going to look after the new technology, right? And this includes staying on top of vulnerabilities, being on call if that's relevant for your organization, major version upgrades, debugging when things go wrong, you name it. And make sure that you don't just hand it over to an infrastructure or platform team and expect them to magically know how to look after it. Because chances are it's going to be you looking after it years later. Speaking from experience. If you started a greenfield project brand new today and you chose some cool new technology to build it in, you know you're going to be going through exactly the same thing a few years down the line. Because there are always going to be new technologies, in the same way that all code is legacy as soon as it's merged into the main branch. You don't have to do a migration every time something new comes out, so think really carefully about your motivations. And there's a big difference between picking a new tool because it seems cool and picking it because it's genuinely going to be better. So I'm sure a lot of us have built horrible workarounds and very complex things that have kind of been replaced by something new and better that's come along, and it's like, oh, thank God. So yeah, by all means, use that. Things obviously become end of life as well. We've talked a lot about technical debt today. We might put off major version upgrades of things because we're intimidated by the amount of work that's required to upgrade them. But it becomes a necessity at the point where the library's not going to be upgraded anymore. and you're at a risk of software vulnerabilities not being patched. And things might seem, that seemed like a good idea at the time might end up being a poor decision. So that idea of prudent and inadvertent tech debt, right? Like we bet on the wrong horse, as it were, when it came to a technology decision. And for us, Flow was one of those bad decisions. We made a choice in the past. It turned out not to have been the right one. You know, it made sense at the time, and we definitely weren't the only ones to have made that decision. It's fine, these things happen. But as well as a lot of good reasons to do a migration, there are plenty of ill-advised reasons to do a migration as well. So sometimes companies migrate to new technologies because it seems like that's what the industry is doing now. And don't assume that just because a well-respected tech company is using a particular technology, that you should too. So when everyone was adopting React, I wonder how many of them stopped to think about whether they actually needed something that was built for an application the size of Facebook. So yeah, we use it internally at Monzo, but our internal app is very, very complex and has a lot of people contributing. And I think it's actually a pretty good use case. But for a static website, how much of it is just excess JavaScript that you're sending down the wire? And can you achieve the same effect with a static site generator? Maybe you joined a new company, or you came onto a new project where they're using a technology or library that you're either not familiar with or you don't like. I was given some good advice by my new boss at a company once when I said that I didn't like a library that they'd chosen. He said, think about whether it is actually worse or whether it's just different from what you're used to. And I think that's really, really good advice. In my case, I do think it was actually worse, and I was right. But the principle is a very good one. So is it actually worse, or is it just that you're not used to it? And by not opening your mind to different technologies from the ones you've used in the past, are you holding yourself back? And even if the new technology that you want actually is better, do you have a good plan for how you're going to get there? Does it make sense in the life cycle of your company to actually do a migration to this new technology? Maybe there's a new language you've been playing with in your spare time and you wish you could use it all the time. Or maybe there's massive hype around a new technology and it seems like it would be good for some reason or another. It's such a low-effort joke. But there are so many new libraries and technologies out there, and it is exhausting trying to keep up. And many of these new technologies are going to come and go before you've even tried them out. So it's really important to consider whether a new technology is actually better than what you've got now. There's nothing wrong with boring. Boring works. Boring is tried and tested, and boring is a lot easier to maintain. This is an excerpt from an essay called Choose Boring Technology by Dan McKinley, and you should read it, and it's at boringtechnology.club. And he says, boring should not be conflated with bad. There's technology out there that is both boring and bad. You should not use any of that. But there are many choices of technology that are boring and good, or at least good enough. MySQL is boring. Postgres is boring. PHP is boring. Python is boring. Memcached is boring. Cron is boring. These technologies, boring though they might be, are familiar and reliable, and people know how to use them. There's lots of documentation, there's big communities around them. They're well maintained. Sure, they're not new and exciting, but they won't let you down. And I hope these lessons will give you a framework to tackle your next migration. And remember, if you do a migration, do it wisely. Don't be afraid to be boring. And maybe you don't even need to do it at all. Thank you very much.